Hi, and welcome back. This is our last video lecture for American Gothic literature. After this, you're going to be doing your own independent reading, so I hope you enjoy. Today, we are going to be talking about Edgar Allan Poe. As you probably know, he was a poet, an early sci-fi writer and satirist. He was a Gothic and sensational short story writer and essayist. He is credited with inventing the detective fiction genre with the creation of his Dupont character. I did not require any of those readings because they're not Gothic, obviously, but I linked to Murders of the Rue Morgue, which is the first of these stories, if you're interested in checking it out. You can see how Dupont is sort of a predecessor to Sherlock Holmes. Poe had some notoriety while he was alive. He was a notable writer, he was a name. The Edgar Allan Poe Society claims that he was the first person to try to write for a living. That's not actually true. Washington Irving has that, can boast that claim. But Poe famously gained a lot of fame after his mysterious death. Part of it is because his death was mysterious, and of course, even though he wrote in a lot of different genres, he was associated with mystery, so the fact that his death was under mysterious circumstances lent to it. But also, he had an enemy, Griswold, who wrote a fake obituary. PBS has a um, funny story about it. I'll just pull up that link here to show you. Recast in the rhetoric of 2020, they say how Poe's reputation, it's okay, the link's not working, but you could check it out another time, how Poe's reputation was shaped by fake news. So here's that website. It's an American Masters, just a short story about the fake news behind Poe's reputation, talking about Griswold's high-profile obituary that was filled with falsehoods that made Poe seem eccentric and crazy. And it's actually that fake biography of him that has so shaped the way America's obsession with him, in part. Um, so we can't really talk about Poe without also considering his presence in pop culture. His death is still mysterious. Like I said, if you're interested in looking it up, there's a lot out there. This is a Smithsonian Magazine article about it. His stories have been retold in a lot of different genres. This is Simpsons' retelling of The Raven, but Poe himself is a really attractive image, again, partially because of Griswold's fake story of his biography. LitHub has a whole list of different stories that include some kind of a Poe character and that play on his mythos in one way or another. So you guys by now are really familiar with my account of the Gothic. Poe, of course, hits all of these notes. He is the person who we most associate with the Gothic when he is writing in that genre. When you read the Fall of the House of Usher, which is our first story, you're going to see all of these things right away. And it's almost like Poe is following a script of the Gothic, even though these classifications of the genre kind of came from scholars after the fact by parsing Poe and other writers like Charles Brockden Brown and Hawthorne, and of course the European tradition of Gothic writers apart. So from the very first sentence of The Fall of the House of Usher, you can see Gothic everywhere. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy house of Usher. So you might notice here a little bit of resonance with Hawthorne, especially with the emphasis on the house. Poe's a little bit of a different writer. He's gloomier, even though they're both describing kind of decaying houses. I think that you can tell that Poe has a darker voice here. It's told in the first person, obviously, which also contributes to that. I know not how it was, but with my first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. So right away, he's invoking the sublime, and he's saying, these dark feelings couldn't even be turned into poetry. It's so dark. Notice all of the commas in these long sentences as he just weighs every line heavily with Gothic detail. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees. So even just in these first few lines, you could see Gothic oozing everywhere. When we talked about Hawthorne, we talked about literary nationalism and trying to create a new literary tradition that was distinctly American. Part of the reason why Poe feels more conventionally Gothic is that he did not care about that. Poe did not want to be a great American writer. He wanted to make money, pay for his family, his life with his wife, Virginia. He was very happy to write in European traditions, and I think that's part of why his Gothic is so recognizable to us today. You can think as you read about him if he's depicting America in any certain way. Sometimes he's very satirical. I did not assign, but he has a great short story called Some Words with a Mummy from 1850, where he just completely lampoons the idea of American technological progress. A few men wake up a mummy with some electrical batteries, and they try to show off how advanced America is. And the mummy's like, Psh, this has got nothing on ancient Egypt. So Poe had kind of a dark view towards progress. He had a pretty dark view towards his country. And I think that those perceptions of his are part of why his Gothic is so powerful to us today. So a few questions for as you read. I really try to scale back the questions when we're doing perusal because I know you're going to ask your own, but I'll point out that it was published before The House of the Seven Gables. And I ask if you notice any similarities between it or Wieland. Obviously, there might be similarities between it and our other readings too, but I think those are the two that are most likely to resonate with this. Imp of the Perverse. In order to understand this story, I want to make sure that you know what phrenology is because it's a key word that he talks about a lot right away. Phrenology was considered a science at the time he was writing it. Now we consider it a pseudoscience. The idea was that different parts of your head corresponded to different qualities. And so phrenologists would feel your head and potentially even measure with calipers where you have lumps. The human skull is not entirely smooth. And then they describe different qualities to that. So they might say, your jealousy part of your head. This is a subfield of craniometry or head measuring. This lump on your head says that you're going to be particularly jealous, and this one over here says that you're going to be particularly astute. It has since been disproven, but at the time Poe is writing, phrenology is a very prominent and promising science because one of the things that concerned Gothic writers, but also everyone in this era in the Western tradition in America and Europe, is the idea of trying to make internalities external. So hoping that evil, like we saw with Carwin the Biloquist, that there was some way that you could be able to tell just by looking at him or measuring him that there was darkness in there. And the idea of not being able to measure or assess, the idea of someone like Theodore Wieland, being crazy in a way that's not scientifically discernible was very scary to people. This went on later in the 19th century to become a very dark but influential idea in criminology. These drawings here are from Cesar Lombroso's book Criminal Man, which was published, I think, in the 1870s, translated into English in 1890. And Criminal Man and later Criminal Woman asserted basically that there were facial features that were in themselves criminal. And this was used to actually put people away for, if they had circumstantial evidence for a crime, but then they had pronounced canines or they had a certain elongated nose. People thought that Lombroso's stereotypes basically were science, and they could say, well, even if this person, we can't 100% definitively prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they committed that crime, we can look at their face and we can look at the shape of their head and see that they are inherently criminal. You can immediately tell how this kind of idea would run rampant with racism, but phrenology is sort of the antecedent to that kind of racial criminological science, and it's an important background for understanding this story. So, as you're reading Imp of the Perverse, I'd say look for references to reason and dark emotion. Why do you think Poe is calling those things up? That's another place where you might see some parallels to Wieland. How does the stream of consciousness of this story relate to or differ from our other readings, including Poe's other stories? What is the perversity and the precipice that Poe discusses throughout this story? A predicament. This is a satirical story, so I'm going to ask you how Poe signals that it's satire and how does it differ from the former two stories that we read. What is really happening in this story at the level of plot? The plot is actually difficult to suss out at first, and I think that when you figure out what's going on, that's part of how you understand that it's a satire. Um, and then finally, what role does Pompey play in the story? And you could think about the name itself, but also, of course, Morrison's American Africanism. And yeah, finally, I would say similar questions with I apparently didn't make a slide for thinking about the last story, How to Write a Blackwood article. It pairs with the predicament. They are related. Obviously, you'll be able to tell as you read them. How does Poe signal that that last one is a satire, and what is he doing with that last satire? How is it different? Finally, as you guys are thinking about particularly these last two satirical pieces, I wonder if they make you think differently about the Gothic at all. So when Poe is kind of making fun of writing a Blackwood article, does that make you think differently about his writing, including his Gothic writing, or anything else that we've read this semester? So those are the questions that I have. I hope that they help shape your reading, and I look forward to seeing what you guys say in your perusal. Thanks.